Welcome to Relax and Chat, episode 55. Our guest today is Joel Flanagan-Grannemann. I think I said that correctly.
Yes, you did.
How are you doing today, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, pretty good. I got all my taxes done finally, so that's a big relief.
Oh, yeah, that's
Oh,
always a relief.
I've owned five companies in my life. This is my first publishing house. And oh my goodness, nobody prepares you for the taxes involved in a publishing house, just royalties alone.
Oh,
And
wow.
most of the accountants I spoke to, of course, they know accounting, but the specifics of a publishing house, you literally got to go to the IRS and your state website and learn the intricacies of that. It was such a headache.
Wow. Wow, that's not something I've ever had to deal with. So,
Yeah, taxes in general are kind of, they are.
you're right. Yeah, it's always a pain. It's always a pain.
On a much, much happier note, I would like to go ahead and jump into the questions. I'm very excited about the first one. I always do a little research on my guests. I went to Amazon and, bummed around the net a little bit. First of all, the covers are beautiful, and I'm
Thank
extremely,
you.
extremely interested in this. You're the author of the high fantasy pentology, Servants of the Moon and Sun. Would you tell us
Well,
about your series?
well, it's thank you again. Thank you for letting me come on the show and to talk about my books. I'm always happy to do that. Yeah, the Servants of the Moon and Sun is a epic fantasy series based on the idea of what if Maleficent was Aurora's mother and the curse still happens. So that's where the idea for the whole series started, and I've got five books published at the moment. It starts out with the first two books actually written together after that, the inspiration for that series. The first two books, Talia, Heir to the Fair Realm, and Talia on the Shore of the Sea. That's the beginning arc of the story. And then at the end of the second book, characters, I have a lot of characters. So I warn your readers and warn your listeners, I have a lot of characters. So, but that's epic fantasy for you. But at the
Yeah.
end of book two, the characters set off in various different directions. And book three follows the fairies, which is Fairy Court in Exile. And book four and book five follow a different set of characters who go off to a place called the Exile Forest, which is a place of sanctuary for women and their half-fairy children. Because there's a lot of half-fairy people running around this world, and there's a lot of discrimination and a lot of racism against them. So this Exile Forest has become this place of sanctuary for them. And right now we're about to go into, we actually just finished up the audiobook for Mother of Exiles, which is book four, which is that beginning of that Exile Forest arc of the story. So my wife is my editor. She's also also records, edits, and takes care of the audiobook. So that book is finally just released yesterday or the day before on audiobook on Audible. And all those the first on Audible, they're available on the audio unlimited plan, where you can pay for the subscription, and it's like the Kindle Unlimited plan, so you can listen as much as you want. We've already got a couple people listening to the first couple books, so we're really excited about that to get those books out. And we're also about, once I get over my accident recovery and all into that, we'll be heading into editing book six, which
Oh,
follows which follows the character of Rose. She's the queen of the human realm, and she's going on a quest to find her stolen daughter, which is Aurora. So and she appears in book two. So this is taking over, because the series is kind of set up in arcs, where you have
uh-huh.
the fairy arc, you have the Exile Forest arc, and this Rose book will start the Elan Town arc of the story, which is this area between the fairy realm and the human realm, kind of an I can't get that word out. It's a border area between the two realms, where a lot of these people, the half fairies and their children and their grandchildren, they have made their home there, because they aren't wanted in the fairy realm, they're not wanted in the human realm, so they kind of have to make their own way in the world. So and Rose is this woman of privilege who's going out into the wilderness, doesn't know what she's doing, with this guide who's a thorn brother, who's the protectors of the Exile Forest. and she just doesn't she doesn't know what she's doing, and it's the story of her. She's been sheltered all her life, and now she's out in the wilderness with this guy, and she doesn't and it's this she's learning about what the world is really like, what the realms are really like,
Mhm.
and she's her eyes are being opened, and it's a journey of her figuring her discovering that she's been so sheltered and all these bad things are happening around her, and she really has decided to she's trying to find her daughter. That's the whole thing, that her daughter has been stolen, and it's that's that book. That's that story. So hopefully we'll get into the editing, and we'll probably hopefully, if everything goes right, it'll be out in the fall of this year.
Oh,
So
now book
that's
six.
that series.
Book six coming out the fall of this year.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's if everything goes right, which it should. And but because we usually try to get all of our books out on about once a year, about the same time.
ah, now do you have it in your mind to just make this an ongoing series, maybe 10, 12, 15 books, or do you have a limit in mind?
No, it's I'm very much a discovery writer, so
Uh-huh.
I'm making it up as I go along, sort of thing. I have a basic framework for the story, but I kind of that's how I approach everything. I have a beginning, I usually have an end, and the middle is kind of I know there's roadblocks along the way where I know I have to hit these certain areas, especially with the Rose book. There was a lot of character growth that she had to go through. So there are different not roadblocks, road maps I have to hit along the way. But right now I've got, it's probably going to be it's probably going to be around the size of the Wheel of Time, like 10, 15 books, because I've got these various different arcs that are going to happen along the way. And I've got at least 8 books planned out. Some I've got after this Rose book, I've got the next book, which finally goes back to Talia's story. Got that one about half written, and then there's a bunch of stories about the fairies. There's a bunch of stories about Aurora growing up in the exile forest. So it's becoming my life's work. So
Oh, sounds like great life's work. It's a
yes,
wonderful place to be.
yep,
You have my full permission to create a rod arc in your story. You can do so if you wish.
sure.
And I can relate to a degree. I have never written a series of books. I have a duology in mind, but I don't know what I'll do beyond that. But as a writer in general, I'm a 100% pantser. I'll get an idea on my way to the coffee pot. I'll sit down with that idea and start typing and literally have no idea where it's going. I follow my characters, so they tell me where they're going. And that can run right into a mess or it can run right into a great story. I never know till I do it, you
Oh
know.
yeah, yeah.
But
That's that. Sorry, go
no,
ahead.
I was just going to say, in that way, our trains of thought are similar, except you look at it on a very grand scope.
Well, I
You
look at it at a grand scope, but also I'm also very character focused too. And
know.
you know, I've run into I'm a a discovery writer, I'm a pantser, and sometimes you realize you've gone down the wrong road, and you can either back up, you got to back up and figure out where you're going, or you can figure out where you can make a door, or you can make a window, or go through that wall on the side. So it's all
Yeah.
figuring out where those I follow those characters. I know where they should be going, but sometimes they'll make decisions
Uh,
that, wow, you get the thing about writing for me is if you have to be into those characters enough so that they take you where the story wants to go, and that they can make these natural decisions in the story and in their lives, that you wouldn't have made that decision if you had started at the beginning of the story. But by the middle of the book, you should know your characters well enough that they're making the decisions that they should be making. And then you kind of you sometimes they'll make really bad decisions, and you got to fly with that. Or sometimes you got to okay, that's not that really doesn't I've gone off a really bad tangent, so I need to back up. And then, that's what that's what pantsing is about. That's what writing is about. That's what editing is about. And you'll go back. I know when I was writing, I wrote the first two books together, and when my wife and I started editing it, we realized it was too big of a story for one book. So we figured out where we were going to cut it in the middle. And then I was going back through the story, and I had made decisions about the magic system, how the characters relate to each other. Like for example, um, they were calling Talia Princess for a while. And then I realized, oh, she's the heir. That's going to be what the fairies call her. That only the human hair is going to call her princess. So I kind of went back and fixed a little bit of things. These are the things you discover as you write with these characters because I knew who Talia was, but she continues to surprise me, and these characters continue to surprise me. I know what they should be doing, and I knew what they want to do, but sometimes how they get to it it's really different. But that's the joy of writing. That's the joy of doing this, that you're finding out, you're discovering things about these characters that you didn't know, and then you realize, oh, that's what they've been doing this entire time when I wasn't looking. That that's what they've been doing off here on the side. So it's that there's nothing like that writer's high that you can say that you realize, oh, this is how I fix this. This is how I fix this plot hole that I put myself in. And I love those moments. I love those moments of that 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 moment of, oh, I know what I can do.
Yeah, creative writing is absolute joy. It's so
Hmm.
much fun. I've written myself into a corner numerous times, and I feel like a superhero when I bust a hole in the wall and keep going.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. That's the thing, and sometimes you just got to let your characters do what they're going to do. And
Yeah.
realize you may have to nudge them a little bit, but you realize they're going to lead you to where the story wants it to go.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
it.
Um, every story I've ever written, I type about 40 words a minute. And I'm constantly rushing, trying to keep up with my characters. Hey, can you hold up a minute? I'm being chased by a lion.
Yeah.
What do you want? Like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, sometimes you feel like you're just a stenographer kind of following them along. Okay, okay, what you doing? What you doing? What you doing? Yeah.
It's so much fun, isn't it? It's a
Yes,
blast.
it is. It's
Now,
amazing.
I'm sorry, epic fantasy in general does have a huge cast. And as you are, well into writing such an epic, I have to ask you, does that make it even more than most any other genre? Uh, you really got to know and define your characters, make sure your reader knows your characters. Because if you got a cast of 40, it'd be real easy to get people mixed up, you
Oh
know?
yeah. And that was one of the things that I really had to work on as I was writing the first two books because I had a cast of about 19 to start with. You know, nine fairies, nine soldiers, and the maid. And I had myself a cheat sheet where I had their names, I had who they were paired with because the ladies and the soldiers were paired because they were each taking care of each other, and their special power, their special talent. And I'd be working on a chapter and realize, okay, I haven't this character hasn't done anything in a while. What can they do? And it was that push and pull between, the main characters, Talia and the couple main fairies and the couple main soldiers. But there's also this huge, behind them, there's this supporting cast. I had to make sure they always had something to do, that they were always doing something, that they had special talents. They always had little moments. And it's those little moments that create the characters. And you kind of start with really started with their names and what their talent was and what their role as either the lady, who are mostly magic users, and the soldiers, and what their talent were, and that it just grew from there. And there's these little moments that you crop up in book one and pay off in book two, or don't pay off until book three or book four or book five. These little things, these little character moments that as I'm writing, I'm just throwing it in. That just popped up, and chapters down the line, I'll realize, oh, that relates to what I'm doing here, and I can pull this in, I can pull this in, I can two these two characters together, and it's it's really putting together a jigsaw puzzle of your own making that you've cut apart together. Now you got to put it back all together. So it's again, it's really a fun thing.
Oh, well, I got to tell you, I'm always very impressed with writers who you can pop them in almost any situation, and that writer can figure out how to get it done. And on that note, I'd like to move on to my next question. Um, you have a story in the anthology, Tales Untold, Mythos Around the World.
Yep.
And your story, The Fairy Soldier's Last Request.
Yep.
Would you tell us about that short story and the anthology overall?
Well, the anthology is about taking folk tales, fairy tales, that sort of thing from all over the world because there's a bunch of it's a bunch of authors and they're taking stories from their own cultures, from their own ideas, whatever, and putting a new spin on them. So with my story, it came from this came from a song, but also a folk tale from the American Civil War. It's about this soldier who comes upon another dying soldier and he can't, it's in the middle of a battle, so he can't take the body. He can't. The dying soldier wants to go home,
Mhm.
so he wants to have his body return home so he can be buried in his home soil. But the guy who finds him can't do that because he's in the middle of the war. He can't do that, so he buries him and writes this note on this willow tree saying, this guy needs to go. This body needs to go back. I don't remember. He needs to go back to his home, whatever. And then the protagonist he credits this idea that he now has his debt of honor to this dead soldier that he needs to come back to him. He needs to survive the war, Civil War, to go back and get the return, return the body to his home. And he really credits that debt of honor to why he survives the Civil War. And at the end of the Civil War, he goes back and the body's gone. Someone else has taken it and changed that what he had carved onto that willow tree, that he's gone back, that his debt of honor has been satisfied. So I took that idea of a soldier with a debt of honor and I put it into my world. And in my world, the fairies and the humans have been fighting, always been fighting. So I kind of threw I don't know where the idea for the protagonist, and it's a first person point of view story, and I don't know where he came from. He's kind of a Han Solo. He's kind of a Mel Reynolds from Firefly. He's kind of that. He's a mercenary. He doesn't call himself a mercenary. He calls himself a freelancer. So don't call him a mercenary. But he stumbles into this fight between a human and a fairy, and he thinks that this is not my fight. I'm not here. I was hired to do something totally different. This is not my fight. These humans and these fairies can kill each other for all I care. I'm just going to leave. But he doesn't. For whatever reason, he doesn't. And he steps in and the fairy's dying. So it becomes his debt of honor. Fairies have different burial rituals. They want to be burned because that's how their spirit escapes back to the cycle and they'll be reincarnated again. But she wants him to take her sword back to her family, so that becomes his debt of honor to it. And the story just is talking about how he goes back to the soldier's family, returns the sword, and everything that happens around him. And again, it's that debt of honor that keeps him going and makes sure that he's gonna, that it awakens something in him and changes his whole outlook on life. And this story takes place in the past of the of in the past of the major timeline of my books. So it's way in the past. So it also and with a lot of my stories, there's a lot of subtle world building. So he at the end of the story he meets another character who has been talked about a lot in the let's say modern version of the books. So it was really a fun story to write, and because that character he had when you're writing a first person story, you have to have a really strong voice in your character. You have to have a really strong personality. Otherwise, it won't, for me, it won't work because otherwise you're just going to be, you just kind of wander around. But this character had such a strong voice from the very moment that I stepped into him, that I knew what he was going to do, and he's this mercenary, he's excuse me, freelancer, but he's living his own life. He has his own code, but then again, his this debt of honor that the fairy soldier put upon him changes his whole life and makes him, think about things in different ways. So it's kind of about how he changed. The story is about how he changes and becomes a different person that he was at the beginning of the story, which is how all good stories should be.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it sounds really cool. And the
Yeah.
anthology overall is myths and sort of fairy tales,
Yeah,
lore. Yeah.
it takes with these, I think there's 13 or 14 different authors. There's some awesome, very interesting stories. There's one that's set in a Indian path in the subcontinent of India's pathos of gods, and there's whole bunches of them. There's one that's sort of like a Sherlock Holmes style story.
Uh-huh.
They're all very interesting, and they all take some different, some obscure, sometimes not, gods or goddesses or folk tales or something like that, and puts their new spin on it. And that's
Oh.
really interesting because that you can that's really interesting, and there's some really great stories in there.
Cool, cool. Now, in the YouTube description box, I'll have links to your entire series and also for that anthology, you know.
Hmm.
And I've published two books so far. They're both short story collections. I really enjoy writing short stories. I am working on a novel. I've discovered novels take longer than short stories.
Yes, they do. Yeah. Well, but sometimes editing a short story is tougher than editing a novel, because in a novel you got a lot of space, but with a short story you don't have as much space. Sometimes you have a very, very solid word count that you have to hit.
Yeah.
So there's, every sentence, every paragraph has a lot more meaning in a short story than it does in a novel. And you got to be sure of, am I using the right word? Do I need this? Do I need this? Can I
Uh-huh.
pull this chapter? Can I pull this little bit out so I can have this, so I can hit my word count? But
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, I've got a lot of short stories too. Some of them I've submitted a bunch, and nothing other than the Fairy Soldier's Last Request has been accepted. So eventually, we will put out our own collection of short stories where I have all these other stories. Some set in the fairy realm, some not.
Ah. Well, just for a little tidbit of thought, my publishing house, RDG Books Press, publishes primarily horror and fantasy. And I haven't yet, but I certainly intend to have a fantasy anthology of some sort. And you'd be welcome to take these stories you haven't published elsewhere and send them my way. I'd
I
like
will
to take a look
def
at them. So, I'll certainly let you know when a submission call comes out. And, if you go digging through your old box of stories and you're like, boy, this one would really be neat, send it my way. I'm very busy. It might take me a little bit, but I will read it. I'll check it out and give you feedback. And then when the submission call comes out, yeah, feel free to send a couple of stories my way. You know.
I will definitely do that. Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right. Well, I have to move on to the next segment because my show's got a time limit on it. But
Yes, yes, we have to move on.
this is always probably my favorite section. I love hearing about the books. I often fill up my TBR with books. I'm heading to go do that. But I'm always fascinated whenever I get to speak with an author. And this segment is you get to address the audience directly and you can share anything you like.
I've talked about my books a lot, but so I'll just tell you where you can find me. I'm at my website is www.servantsofthemoonandsun.com. There you can find everything about me. You can see pictures of my cats. You can see all the pictures of the covers. You can join my mailing list. And if you sign up for that mailing list, you'll get a free short story, which is a really short story about Talia's first heartbreak, and you can meet the purple-haired flyer. So And so there you can sign up for that mailing list, and it comes out twice a month, and it's usually just a short thing talking about my writing process, talking about what's going on in our lives, going on with our cats, or our vacations, whatever. Just I don't try to spam people, and all the information about sales, new releases, all that goes out in the mailing list first. You can also find me on couple social medias. I'm on Twitter as Servants and I'm also on Blue Sky at Servant and, I believe. I'm not sure. I'm a little more active on Blue Sky lately than I am on Twitter, but I'm on both, and there, I'm on both, and I put out a lot of I participated in a lot of the indie writers prompts, so mostly do those daily on both sites. I post a lot of raccoon pictures, so if you're into that, give me a follow.
Yeah, cool. Well, that takes care of the next segment where I ask for that stuff. So that's cool. Uh, yeah, the books sound fantastic. Do you have an average over the 5 or 6 books? What's kind of the word count? What are we looking at on each book?
I can't
On
really.
average.
I'm not really sure. The first book is the longest book. The second book is a little shorter. Very short, a little shorter than both the 4 and 5. Those are kind of short. I really don't know off the top of my head what the word count is.
Are we closer to 300 to 400 or 800 to 1,000?
Oh, no, not 800. I think air is three something. So they're all around. They're a little bit lower, all a little bit lower than that. I think the Rose book is going to be about the same word count as the first Talia book. So
Oh,
yeah, so it's around there. I mean, they're not chonky. They're not hugely chonky, but they're a little big.
they're epic fantasies.
Yes, they have to be. They have to be epic.
Yeah, the only reason I ask that is with the work that I do, my time is really crunched.
Oh
And,
yeah, I understand
I
that.
love to read a good story, but like, a 1,200 page novel is just not in the cards. It would take me 6 months to read it, you
No,
know?
they're not that big, and they're also no, they're not that big. No.
Cool. Well, I am definitely heading over to Amazon and Goodreads and at least filling up my TBR. And
Cool.
what is
Appreciate
the
it.
title of the very first book in the series?
It's Talia, Heir to the Fairy Realm.
Awesome. Well, of course, that's the first place to start,
Yes. Yep.
right?
You want to start with those first two books, and then if you like the fairies, you can go to the third book. If you like the Exile Forest arc better, you can move on to the fourth and fifth books. So
Uh,
it's that's or if you're more interested in the Exile Forest to start off with, starting off with Mother of Exiles is also an alternate entry point in the story.
oh,
So
cool.
yes,
That's awesome. So people can read the
yes,
description, pick the arc that they feel they would like to try out to get to know your writing.
yeah,
And then, of course, they can always go back and read the other arcs, right? So
yes,
it
of
isn't
course.
necessarily 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Mhm.
6.
I mean, you can read it that way, or you can read it
Yeah.
whatever way you want.
Well, it's really awesome that you give the reader the option that they can go like that. That's nice. I haven't heard that
Yes,
before. You know, I don't know a whole lot about these big long series, but I've always thought you have to kind of do the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And
hmm
it's nice that you have individual arcs that a reader can jump into. That's really cool. Did you think of that
yes.
right from the beginning, or was that decided in editing?
It was kind of decided as I was going along because it started out with the first two books, and then I knew where the fairies were going, and I knew where the Exile Forest was going, and it's kind of it evolved organically.
Ah, well, sounds really fascinating. And I'm afraid I'm about to run out of time. I want you to know, very, very, very interesting. I love the sound of the story. I like fairies. I like any kind of creature or people or whatever. I like things with imagination.
Yes,
If you got
yes,
imagination and you got some emotion in the story, I'm in.
yeah,
I don't care what genre it is. If you have those two things, I'm in.
yeah.
And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Great talking with you. Lots and lots
Great
of fun.
talking to you too.
You're welcome to come back anytime. If you want to promote book number 6, we can certainly do that.
I will definitely do that.
To your release date.
Mhm.
To the audience, episode 55 of Relax and Chat. As you know, I'm always limited on time, and we got to call it quits. But it's been a real pleasure. Really nice to have Joel Flanagan-Grannemann on our show. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this little show, sir. I really
And
appreciate
and thank you for inviting me.
it. Everybody have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.
All right, bye.